All right, hi everybody. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com. I'm pleased to welcome back to our webcast series Noah Mosley and GarrettKrebs from MSX Group. They're going to be speaking about financial reporting and budgeting today and replacing management reporter as forecaster. As we get started, please know we do have, we are going to make time for questions, and we also are going to have a couple of poll questions for you throughout today's event, so be on the lookout. We invite your feedback and your questions as we go. I know Derek and Noah will be making time. And Noah is going to be the person kicking off here, so Noah, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Okay, thanks Jason, I appreciate that. Thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Noah Mosley, and I want to go to the next slide for introductions with you. I'm dialing in from Pensacola, Florida. I've got GarrettKrebs with us as well from San Diego, California. We are both with the MSX Group and have been since we started this company. We have over 20 years of experience working with financial reporting and budgeting solutions in the field, primarily with the Microsoft Dynamics group of ERP solutions. Derek and I both worked with Microsoft before we started the MSX Group, as well as everyone in the MSX Group itself. We're all former Microsoft people who are on the development teams, support teams, consulting, and the training teams back when we did these things for FRx and Forecaster and Management Reporter. A little bit about what brings us to where we are today. We are offering Prospero, a financial reporting and budgeting solution for everyone out there. We have developed Prospero in-house, and we did this because Microsoft has taken kind of a different path as far as financial reporting and budgeting solutions. Microsoft recently launched their Microsoft Dynamics 365 for Operations, their new flagship ERP solution. And with that same announcement, they decided to discontinue development on their other financial reporting and budgeting solutions that they've been using for years now. That was Management Reporter, Forecaster, and FRx. So they're going to discontinue development on those products. Support is still being handled for those products, but that will eventually be phased out as well. With that in mind, anybody who's currently using those products will eventually need to find some other solution to replace them. And that's where we saw this coming. We developed this over the last several years. We rolled it out first with financial reporting, and then we started last couple of years we rolled it out with budgeting as well. Now, to get us a little bit of interaction going for this presentation, just have two poll questions for us. It's a good opportunity for you to try your WebEx poll submission or the question boxes on that WebEx control panel. First one is, we're curious, what do you currently use for financial reporting? You should have a polling window that pops up there. Are you currently using Management Reporter? Are you currently using FRx or some other application? Just to get a feel for how the audience is out there and get a little interaction going with the group.
All right, I'll close this poll out in about 5 seconds here, so please do submit your answers. Oh, and there's going to be a little delay before I show the responses, but no, I can tell you we have 64% on Management Reporter, 21% on FRx, and 14% selecting other. And yeah, if you have another, feel free to put it in the chat and tell us, the panelists, what other solution you are using.
All right, thanks, Jason. See those results. It's good to have a feel for our audience out there. And what we're going to look at today applies to both of those and any other people who are trying to find a new solution for the financial reporting and budgeting. The second poll question I'm going to pull up there for us on the screen is, what are you currently using for your budgeting and forecasting solution? Are you out there using Microsoft Forecaster? Are you still using Excel? Or are you using some other budgeting solution? That window pop up there, give you an opportunity to select it and submit. I'll let Jason watch the results roll in for us.
All right, a few more answers coming in. I'll close that out. And I see one more person needs to submit, and then I'll close it out.
So we only have 2 polls for this, and as we go through, if you have questions or you want to just send us any kind of message, there is a question section on that WebEx control panel, and there's a chat section. So we'll be watching those throughout the presentation today. About halfway through, we'll look back and tackle any reporting questions, and towards the end of Derek's part of this, we'll look at any questions for forecasting and budgeting.
So the winner on that one is Excel with 61%, followed by Forecaster 22%, and then other for the rest.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Appreciate the feedback from everybody out there. Let me see the results there popped up there, and I'll close that window, and we'll carry us on into the presentation. All right, so this webinar is to discuss Prospero. I want to make sure that everybody has a basic understanding about what this application does for you. Again, we built this in-house at the MSX group, and we built it for financial reporting and budgeting and forecasting. It's one application to handle all those needs from both those 2 types of scenarios. You can use Prospero to handle the creation and the generation and the publishing of all your income statements, your balance sheet statements, cash flow statements, and any other kind of supporting schedule that you want to pull together from your general ledger data or any other data that you want to import into the Prospero database. So you can handle all that for your financial reporting inside Prospero. In addition to financial reporting, we also have in the same application budgeting and forecasting. So you don't have to have a separate application to handle these 2 different tasks at the office. One application to handle both of this, and inside the budgeting and forecasting piece, this can handle your basic budget input for your annual budgets, your monthly, your reforecast. You can have as many versions of the budget as you need to. It's got built-in detailed budgeting for your human resource balances, your payroll, taxes, wages, and benefits, capital budget for new assets, line item detail, and other details as well. And also it's got real-time collaboration, and you can avoid all the trouble you have in Excel if you've kind of outgrown budgeting in Excel. One slide here about key features about Prospero before we actually jump into the application. Prospero uses building blocks, very similar to how FRx and Managed Reporter and Forecaster uses row definitions, columns, and trees to make their input screens and their reports. Prospero does the same thing. We mix and match our line sets and our column definitions, and we use reporting trees to pull all that data together into our reports and our input screens. Everything that you create inside Prospero is stored in a SQL database. So it's a great central location that everybody at your company shares for all of your report definitions, as well as your budget input screen definitions, and any data for reporting and budgeting in that one SQL database. If you're thinking back to FRx, huge step forward because FRx had their data stored in Access databases, and it was more than one Access database. And FRx stored data in files on your network in the shared sysdata folder, which had a lot of problems with file corruption, and people could misplace that on the network. So a huge step forward going from Access databases and files on the network to a SQL database for storing everything. Security is all based off of Windows authentication or standard authentication, so you have great control over who sees which reports and who has access to what parts of the budget. With everything that you run inside Prospero, we've got built-in graphing analysis with the drill down. So like in FRx, you'd have to export to another application and build charts and graphs. Managed Reporter had some graphing, but it wasn't very dynamic at all. It's very static. But here in Prospero, we can build the charts and graphs with any report that you generate, and you can double-click and drill down through those charts and graphs to the new data. Prospero has integration to your general ledger, so don't worry about if you add a new account in GP or SL or your other ERP solution. It's going to get copied over to Prospero automatically. You don't have to go over there and set that up again a second time. in Prospero. And when you build your reports and input screens for your budget and such, you can set those up so that you use wildcards or ranges so that a row, say, for revenue, if it has like 5 different reports and you add a new sales account to that grouping, it'll automatically expand. You don't have to go and update that line set for that report definition. I'll show you that in just a few minutes. And migration of reports from FRx, and also copying your budget setup from Forecaster is available. So don't worry about losing your existing reports or your existing budget setup from FRx or Forecaster. We can copy that over to Prospero for you and get you up and running very quickly, so you don't have to recreate those input screens or those reports from scratch. And Derek's going to come in here. He's got a couple slides he's going to run through while I get ready for our presentation on the financial reporting piece. Derek, you with us?
Yes, I am, Noah.
Sounds good.
And
I've got a slide up there for you.
okay. Good afternoon, everybody. This is GarrettKrebs, Senior Consultant with the MSX Group. And for the last 20 years, myself and the MSX Group focused on financial reporting and budgeting. And really, we just wanted to capture a few of the challenges and pain points you have today, and obviously where we've learned from all those lessons when working at FRx Software and Microsoft and MSX Group when we're delivering Prospero. Of course, the first couple of bullet points, I'll maybe just rattle off a few of these. Noah touched on a couple of them. Basically, Microsoft, as they gobbled up these products, no longer developing those tools. So about 6 to 7 years ago, that's where the MSX Group was formed to come up with that replacement product. Microsoft had some lofty goals to maybe combine the reporting and budgeting applications into one application. And I'm thinking about past trade shows and convergences where we had some slides sort of saying this is our roadmap, but that never took fruition. But definitely now with Prospero, it has taken fruition. You currently are maintaining 2 separate applications, more than likely, on some of those polls you responded to, like FRx or Manager Reporter on your left hand on the reporting side, one application, and definitely probably Forecaster Excel on the other hand. But now we leverage one single application that does both of those functions here. And Noah's going to shed a little light further on that revenue example, what we call the expand feature. Super easy to avoid or reduce maintenance altogether if you add new accounts or new departments, leveraging our roll-up trees. Thankfully, too, for the output, the old FRx product had several output options, but then Manager Reporter only had one to the electronic viewer, but we brought those back into Prospero. And Noah, if you don't mind going to the second slide, I'll just bullet point a couple of these that we'll get further today. Noah talked about the graphing. He'll give you a nice little illustration where basically it's very rudimentary or static graphs currently in, let's say, Manager Reporter. Forecaster doesn't have them at all, but Prospero has very robust graphing and drill down, even where you can change the drill order, like drill into department first, account second, or vice versa, or any order based on your general ledger segments and data. We also can report and budget non-general ledger segments, like my session half part of today. We'll look at, let's say, HR down to employee, or let's say for revenue and cost of goods sold, I want to look down at the salesperson or product. That might not be general ledger segments, but all means we can incorporate that in our Prospero budget or data warehouse. Report library, unless you've lived it, every time you generate a Manager Reporter report, it stores every version, but we only end users for Prospero only see published reports once you finally blessed it to avoid preliminary reports getting into the wrong hands. And definitely we work with other third-party reporting and budgeting tools, but Prospero is probably one of our biggest market share for its power, ease, and value. So thank you, Noah, for allowing me to recap those, and I'll pass it back to you, and we'll pull up the application, and I'll take your lead after that.
Thanks, Derek. So yes, let me take you over to Prospero. We'll give you a tour. Type in your questions to that WebEx control panel as I go through it. Derek's watching those, and we'll take those halfway through the show here. Start us off looking at the login. Whenever you launch Prospero, this is a desktop application. You can log into as many different entities as you need at your company. So we've got a drop-down list at the very top here. I've only got Prospero Demo listed, but if you had 20 different companies or 20 different entities, they could all be listed in that drop-down list. Easy to switch between those. Or it might be where you have like several companies that should all be in one entity, and so they all can consolidate together. Easy to handle that as well inside Prospero. So set those up as many copies, add versions of entities as you need, and have the consolidation options as well. For security, it's all based off of standard or Windows authentication, so you can use your network logins so that your users do not have to have an extra set of user ID and passwords to keep track of, or use standard to log into the application there. Okay. Now, once you launch Prospero, we'll talk a little bit about the navigation before I get into the reports itself. So on my screen, I'm looking at the home page for Prospero. I've got the quick launch window open, the one with the large colorful buttons in there in the middle. This quick launch window here in the middle is an easy way to jump to any of the reports that you use most frequently, and you can change this. So if one user has 5 reports they need and the next person has a whole different set of reports, it's all customizable for that user. I've got a section here for all my different charts and reports that I use most frequently. If I scroll down a little bit on the right, got another section for my budget input screens and quick links at the bottom. Again, all that's customizable. You can show up here anything that you need for your installation of Prospero. And there's also a main navigation panel on the left-hand side here. We've got a very similar layout to how we have Management Reporter from Microsoft. So if your users are currently using Management Reporter, they will not have much difficulty in transitioning to this at all. So on the left-hand side, I've got a button for reports, and then at the top, I can see my reports and all the different ones that we've set up inside Prospero. And then I also have buttons for all of my line set definitions. This is all the line sets that I set up to use to define my reports or my different input screens or anything else I need to set up for definitions. I've also got a button for all my column definitions that I use for input, reports, and also have a section for trees. Trees are a lot different from FRx or Management Reporter. They're very similar to how you have the trees in Forecaster. If I look at the trees we have here, I've got different ones for all of my companies, my natural main accounts, my location dimensions, and my department dimensions. Now, if you have other dimensions, that all be listed here. And if I expand these, you can see that I've got one that says all. So this will have every department I ever add to any of my companies here. And if I ever add a new department, I don't have to go back here and add it to this summary. It'll automatically be included. You have the same thing under location with all, and I've made 2 others as well to organize my locations. Natural, same thing for naturals. So these tree definitions are just quick and easy ways to summarize any of your main account numbers or any of your other dimensions or companies. And you'll use these for any of your report or input screen definitions or prompts. So you can use these in your line set definitions, even in your column definitions. And when you run a report or when you run or open up an input screen, you can have prompts for which one of these you want to open up. And just to briefly look at, let's say, our total company by division, if I double click, that opens up on the right-hand side for me. And I've just got summaries I've added here to list all the different dimension IDs that roll up into these different folders. Now you can add these individually. If you do add these individual, though, you do have to come back and add those here if you add new ones. But if you use ranges of wildcards, you would not have to come back and make any edits to these roll-up definitions. And if I look at my trees for my naturals, and my net income, I did use wildcards for my revenue. I used the 4 and 3 question marks. So that would pull in any account that I've got that starts with a 4. So I would never have to come back to this definition and change it, because it will pick up any account that starts with a 4 for us. And you'll see these referenced when you look at our line set definitions. Now, there's several other buttons on the left-hand side. When you log in, not all users will see all these buttons. If you're just someone who should be able to open up Publish Reports, then you'll see this button at the bottom for Publish Reports, and they would not even see the buttons for lines, columns, and trees or reports. All right, so it depends on your user access, determines what buttons you have on the left-hand side here. The option for Publish Reports, I want to mention that briefly. Anytime you generate a report, it's just kind of like looking at that report on the screen. And it's not actually saved in the SQL database unless you publish it. And that's what is available to all of our viewers, all the published reports. And that way you don't clutter up the SQL database every time you run a report, because in any given month you may run your income statement 50 times before you're actually finished with all the balances being posted in the general ledger. So publishing reports is a great way to just publish that one copy that you know is finalized and ready for distribution. Let's look at one of the reports that I've got open already here. Well, I use this button here for our favorable/unfavorable budgeted income statements. If I click that one time, that brings up the window that will let us run this report. Now, there's a lot of check boxes here, some drop-down arrows. This is not the report definition itself. These are just prompts that I might want to change before I actually run the report. Like I can change what location I want to run this for, or what department I want to run it for, or what company. You make any changes here, change the date for the year, the period, and then after you make those settings, click OK to actually run the report. Now we're going to be looking at this income statement. When this opens up, it's a separate tab right here inside Prospero. So I've got the Quick Launch tab, and I've got the report I just opened up. When you build your reports inside Prospero, you can have any kind of formatting you want, any kind of background colors, underlining, double underscores. You control the formatting, the colors, and everything when you build these reports. This report's only got a very few columns, an actual column, prior year, actuals, budget balances, and a dollar variance and percent variance between the budget and the current year actuals. But when you build your column definition, you can have as many columns as you need to. When you build your line set for this report, you could have as many lines as you needed. So you're not limited by the number of columns or lines here, and it's really flexible. For analyzing the data here in these reports, we've got drill down. So I ran this report. I can have it just be a summary page with no drill down, but I did have this one where I can double click on any row here and see where these balances come from. So like on this revenue row for $1.1 million, I can double click anywhere on that row. It'll drill down, open the next page for me on a new tab, same application. I can see all the balances that make up that grand total for net revenue. Great way to drill down and see the details. And I can drill down from the summary page all the way through my different dimensions and all the way down to the account level detail page and the transaction level detail pages too. And another great feature is if I want to change the order drill down. So I've drilled down here, and I'm going down through my sales and intercompany and returns and discounts, my different sets of natural accounts. Let me close this window, and I'm back to my first report. If I want to say I want to drill down not to the accounts first, but I want to see my locations or departments, I can go to this button at the top left here to change that drill down order. And I'll just click and drag departments to the top here. So now when I double click on that row for net revenue, I'll double click and drill down to my list of departments for that row. Although it could be any of these other ones. I'll do OK here. Double click on this row for net revenue. And now when I look at it, these are my departments that are listed, not my main account numbers. So great way there to change it as you're actually looking at the report. You don't have to go back and change the report definition and rerun the report. It's all right here while you're looking at it.
One thing to add there, Noah, too, is many client requests like, hey, can I send this subtotaled out to Excel PDF? And he'll probably just call out the icons in the toolbar on the output for, allowing you on this little slice or drill that you define to maybe do some other ad hoc analysis out to Excel or PDF with that. So very nice feature that most of our customers have responded very favorably to.
Yep, thanks, Derek. In addition to looking at this data in the numeric layout, a lot of users will like the graphical analysis options inside Prospero. So all this data, you can take it and flip it from just numbers into charts and graphs automatically. There's a button at the top here for display as chart. So all that data, I just flipped it. I still have that tab at the top here. I can jump right back to this to see the numbers. Or I made this new tab here for charting that data here inside Prospero. And this has got all the different options for changing the layout. If I look at options on the top here, I want to explode these out to give it a little different look and feel. If you wanted to change the group smaller slices together, so I've got several here that are very tiny that are kind of overlapping a little bit. So if I want to just group those together so that, say, anything smaller than a certain percentage is just grouped together. So I said that anything that was less than 10% of the total, just group it together in this green slice. Easy to click and drag that stuff around and make those changes there while we're looking at this data. And these charts and graphs that we made from that, you can still double-click and drill down on these pie charts and graphs. So if I double-click on this row here for sales, that'll drill down and show me how much money is on that section of the pie chart. And every time I double-click and drill down, it makes a new tab at the top here, so I can easily jump back to any of these other tabs. So, built-in chart and graphing for Prospero. That's available for any report that you generate inside Prospero, although you could turn it off, so if you don't want it, you don't have to have it there. Any of these reports that we're looking at or the budget input screens, you can send these out to other file types. So if you wanted to export this out to Excel or send this out to PDF documents, those are built into Prospero automatically, or send these out to the printer with this icon on the top left here. So if you don't want to just look at the data inside Prospero, you can send the data out to those other file types. And even though I did that, looking here at the report after I built it, you can set the report definitions up so that they generate automatically to Excel. They generate automatically the PDF for the printer. So like with Management Reporter, you have to generate a report, look at it in the viewer, and then decide if you want to send it out to Excel or the printer or PDF or some other format. Inside Prospero, you can send it directly from the report definition to those other file types. Well, let me take us back. I'm going to close out of a few windows here. And I'm back on the report window here. It's going to look at how this report was built with the line set and the column set and the report definition. See how much I can cover of this before I need to switch over to Derek's side. So when I'm looking at this report, I'm going to look at the line set with you. Now this has got a lot of different lines here, but when I look at the line set definition, it's going to be much more summarized than this. Because I don't have to go to my line set and list out every different account like in this expense section. And I've got icons at the top here that will let me open up the line set this report uses. If you think back to Management Reporter and FRx, you could not open up the line set this report uses from the web viewer or from the drill down viewer. You'd have to go back to Report Designer, open up the report definition, and then go to the line set or the column set. Here, you can go straight to it right from the report that you just looked at. So I'll click this icon to open up the line set that this report uses. It's much more summarized than the report we looked at. Far fewer rows here because we've got certain rows that are set to automatically expand. It's using those summaries in our main account or natural reporting tree definitions. And I've told some of these to automatically expand and show me the individual accounts that are included on that row. So like if I look at total expenses, I'm using a natural, which is EXPN, which is a code that we set up inside Prospero, and it's summarizing all of our expenses. And I can select that from the list. There's a lookup button. Go in here. If I expand this for my total expenses, I can see it's a range of all the accounts from 6,000 through 7,999. So if you ever add a new account in that range, you don't have to come back here and change this definition. That new account would automatically get picked up, and it would automatically show whenever you generate the reports next. So great way to reduce maintenance and a great way to reduce how many lines you have to have in your line set definitions. Now the trick with that row, got it referenced here, it's using that summary roll-up for total expenses. And a little bit over to the right, I've got an expansion option. There's a drop-down box that says, okay, for this row, pull the balance, but above it, expand and show me all the individual accounts that roll up to it. And I can go down as many levels in that roll-up as we need to. So a great way to make a very condensed line set definition, which is kind of like your row definition from FRx or Management Reporter, and have that automatically expand and show me the new accounts. Great way to reduce maintenance. Now, I'm looking at this screen. You can add as many different rows here as you need to. If you have summaries referenced, you don't have to have a formula for that summary row, whereas in FRx and Management Reporter, you would need to have a formula for any subtotal rows here that's handled by the reporting trees. But if you do need formulas, you can have those in the formula column for any row of these reports. Really flexible. Just reference your codes in that left-hand column for the formulas. But again, those reporting trees, great addition to summarize balances and have those automatically expand for us. And as you're building your line set definitions, you know, in FRx and Management Reporter, you'd always have to build the report, these definitions, go run the report in order to see what it looked like after it runs. But with us here in Prospero, we do have previews for all of these. So if you want to see how this would look like in a report, there's a checkbox for preview that opens up the window at the bottom here for us. I can see our formatting, the colors, whatever background colors, give you an idea for how this might look when you use it in a report definition. We have the same preview option in column definitions as well, so that really comes in handy if you don't have to actually run the report to get a feel for how it's going to look when you do use it. Well, I'm looking here at this line set, a couple of things I mentioned, the auto expand, I got the preview. It's also an option for where used. So if you want to see where this line set is used, what input screens is it used for, what reports is it used for, click this button here, and then I'll show you a list of every report or every input screen for budget that this line set is used. So a great way to see if you make a change here, where all will it be reflected. So I need to give Derek a little time for budgeting, but a couple of things before I switch over to Derek. Let me look at the column definition that we had for this report. Very similar to the column definitions inside FRx or inside Management Reporter. I've got our column types. There's all drop-down lists, so you get a list of all your different options for the columns, balances, pulling balances from the general ledger data. Book codes, these are pulling actuals or any budget that we've got stored inside Prospero. We've got some of these variance columns as calculated columns with the formulas about 5 rows down here. A lot of similarities to FRx and Management Reporter column definitions. And again, we had the migration from FRx, so you don't have to recreate these. We copy these from FRx. You have these as a starting point already.
Noah, quick comment before you. Do you mind going back to that column, please?
Okay.
And the question came in that I'll maybe have him, obviously time permitting, we can maybe future phone calls talk about more, but columns H and I, they are what we call a detailed type column, because the question came in saying, oh, can we drill down to the account transaction level? And yes, by all means, like you're familiar with FRx and Management Reporter, we can do so. And these are also added fields where we can look at additional transaction detail, like maybe the vendor or customer, what the journal entry was, etc. So those are very useful fields. And last little phrase is an end user can see that same detail I just spoke of without needing access to your general ledger program or that database. And in my session, I'll just give a quick little overview of Prospero's security, very easy and user-friendly for the accountants to set up. And go ahead, Noah, and whenever you want to pass it my way, I'm ready.
Yep, just got a couple other pages I want to show them here. So for this report definition, if I use this icon here to open up the report definition for it, very similar to the report definitions for FRx and Management Reporter, several tabs here across the top. What line set are we using? What column set are we using? What default date do we run these reports for typically? Output options. This is the one where FRx, I'm sorry, output is where you can send these out to other programs like Excel or PDF or straight to the printer when you click Run Reports. You've got a tab for chart definitions, like we just looked at one for drill down to pie charts earlier. You get the tab for headers and footers. And all of these are lookup buttons, so if you don't know the codes inside Prospero, you can use the lookup button for any of your headers and footer sections. Now, I also want to mention that security for all of these reports that you build, really easy to control who should have access to which reports and what parts of those reports. Once you have all your users set up inside Prospero, you can set those up into different groups and assign those with this option for visibility. Click this one time. That opens up the window that says, okay, for this report definition, what individual users or what groups of users should have access to this report. It's easy to set that up. Set it at one time in this report definition. Then anytime you run the report in the future and publish it, then only those people can see that report and only their data for their part of the company. Now there's a lot of other bells and whistles that we have set up inside Prospero. Derek's going to show you now some of the things about budgeting for us. We'll take questions throughout. Derek, do you have any questions before we look at the budgeting and forecasting piece with you?
I think we're good. I've been trying to respond to a few of those as they come in. And just a reminder, feel free to take advantage of either the chat or question area within the WebEx control panel. And by all means, we'll pull up our contact information at the very end of today's session for any follow-up questions. So otherwise, no, I think we're good. And I'll take over whenever you want.
Yep, I'll let you go ahead and switch to your screen there. Derek is going to handle the budgeting and forecasting side of Prospero. Again, it's the same application I've been working with. We're just going to look at his machine for this part of the webinar. Some of your users back at your company, they may not have access to budgeting. They may just use Prospero for financial reporting. So they wouldn't have all the things that Derek's about to show us. And you can use the lines and the columns and the trees that we use for financial reporting in the budget setup as well.
Derek, are you able to bring up your screen?
I'm looking at some of the controls right now. Looks like I was made the presenter, but I'm just trying to see what additional clicks I might need that you might have to grant me. But
look for the share menu in the upper left, and then my screen.
Okay.
All right, I see it coming up now.
All right. Thank you,
Jason.
Jason.
We're with you.
All right, and good morning, good afternoon, whatever time zone you're on. Thanks for joining us today. And that was Noah Mosley just speaking just moments ago, and then I'll now step in and know if there's any thoughts or things that I might have overlooked. By all means, add please to our conversation. Quick little reminder, myself, GarrettKrebs, or the MSX group. Last 20 years, myself and the rest of our team, we worked at FRx, Microsoft, and MSX all those years. So we currently support thousands of users, especially on the former, let's say, legacy product of FRx. Even though Microsoft's no longer supporting it, we support tons of people on FRx and Forecaster today. And fun part of my job is I've worked with over 300 plus customers in different industries over these years. So I want to just shed a little light of maybe a consideration for your next step of budget reporting, how very seamless it is from that transition. Like Noah mentioned, but a few little bullet points to start. We have a migration from FRx into Prospero and also Forecaster and Prospero, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to learn a whole new another interface, and we use the same very familiar rows, columns, and trees type paradigm. So very easy when we convert people, as we've done many existing those Microsoft legacy ones. My focus today is going to be now on the budgeting side, but I'll probably mix in a few other generic product capabilities that apply to both sides of the fence for reporting and budgeting. But let me paint the little Excel hell picture that we always do about many of you in that poll responded, hey, we're still doing things in Excel. We're still using Forecaster, which Forecaster will still support even beyond what Microsoft does, like my FRx case point. But those people using Excel, it's very pain in the rear, broken links, formulas, hard to collaborate, no one version of the truth. So that's why we always recommend using these purpose-built budgeting tools. Now, of course, with Prospero, brought to you by the same team that delivered the FRx Forecaster and Manager Reporter of all those years of industry experience, thousands of customers helped over the years. And really that's going to really speed up, giving you more control of the process, like a few of those bullet points that I really won't rattle off. I'll probably do so through the eyes of the product here in just a second. All right. I actually have a few sessions of Prospero opened up based on maybe a different role you might be in. Noah was showing you earlier a Power Administrator user, where especially as I open up this navigation pane to the left, where sometimes I don't need to have that occupy my real estate room when I'm maybe doing budget input or looking at a report, I can minimize it. But let me paraphrase, like an end user I'm currently logged in as, they might have really two functions. Maybe if they're doing budget input, they'll have this input link, or secondly, for the published reports based on usually you, a central person in finance, like maybe Noah might be, you centrally generate one report for everybody ahead of time. That way, when I open up a given report, I'm able to only see whatever company, location, departments you've given me access to on what we call assignments, which will be one area I'll further take you to as we discussed. Now, looking back to this input area, you could have as many different budget versions as you want, like quarter one, quarter two, best case, worst case type. But as I'm also correlating some of my phrases and thoughts about all the Forecaster implementations we've done over the years, thankfully it's a much more streamlined approach from going from one budget year or version to the next. You don't have to go through all the extra period creation you had to in Forecaster. You don't have to create all the additional columns. You simply just say, hey, instead of 2018, you change it to 2019 without going through a bunch of other old steps. I do have a couple of budget input screens open currently. Noah showed briefly the quick launch area. Like for this end user, maybe you in finance gave me two reports. Maybe an income statement rolling 12-month or income statement actual versus budget. That's always an easy way to compare my data. But also you gave me the ability to update my budget for just my assigned departments or locations. If I clicked on that button, based on my user security, is what I'd be having visibility to. We saw briefly a few of other dimensions like company dimension or maybe the account dimension. We don't see that currently because you can control what your prompts are. Like for the location department, I'm logged in as an end user, and right now all I did was I turned off to not use the selection tree, which is very nice because you can toggle on the fly, seeing maybe the default tree out of the box called all, requires no setup and maintenance. Or definitely we saw briefly, let's say some of the trees that you create where you might want to break it down to the New York, Miami, where we can do the ranges and wildcards to avoid any maintenance. Where in FRx and Manager Reporter, you'd have to manually add these separate units to your tree, but thankfully we reduced a lot of that manual legwork. All right, so I have a couple of these screens already open for, let's say, this single location. And later when I bounce to security, this user has access to all departments. And sometimes it's common to maybe bounce between department A, B, C to enter the data. But by all means, we can combine segments in the line and column. Noah showed earlier a Lineset that only had the account segment, but we easily can turn on, like in the line or column, additional segments for any of our additional filtering or definition of. I'll just cancel a couple of these prompt windows looking at really security. So I'll call this budget screen number 1. Like here in yellow, I'm looking at our Denver operations. Or here to the right, I might also have a second department my focus is on. And in the Excel hell world, I'll even show you a little file here as I lead into my next little thought or two. In the Excel hell world you're probably coming through, let's role play you have 10 locations and 10 departments. So here's Excel sheet number 1, sheet number 2, all the way maybe through sheet number 100. You'd have to set up and maintain all those individual Excel sheets, followed by formulas, because there might be one revenue formula across your 100 departments times 12 months. You might have 1,200 formulas in Excel, but in Prospero you only have one single line formula, taking, let's say, units times price, or whatever you want to formulate revenue or any account. I'll be primarily focusing on my income statement budgeting. That's most disparate and spread out, but by all means we can do balance sheet and cash flow budgeting. That's a more common trend, along with multi-year planning, as I had a call right before today of a Prospero user now setting up multiple forecasts. Now, translated another way, you might have various templates or line sets. If I laid out all my location departments on the table, I might have all these group of location departments that are expense only using one line set or row format that has expenses only in it. Or now currently we're looking at a sales and cost of goods sold department where you see sales account 4100, cost of goods sold, and gross margin along with the expense. You could have as many different templates as you want, but I just gave an example, maybe 2 templates, expense only, or maybe revenue and COGS. And that's really what we call the overrides. How about on that phrase? I'll show you a little bit later where you can define the default line set and maybe unique line sets that your different departmental groupings or locational groupings use, leveraging in those roll-up trees, multifaceted. Very powerful, those trees for reporting, drill down groupings, secondly for security definitions, and even calculation logic, or maybe your templates that are shared or not. I will now go through a few other little ins and outs of this data input screen. And this one user, as I'm just going to compare it and contrast it, maybe a power user I'll log in later with, does not have maybe HR, or excuse me, capital, or maybe revenue details available to them based on whatever extent you want their access to. And I'm going to go back to this one other screen where I have a little bit of my data that I play around with. Some of the extra bells and whistles like we coined moments ago, where one would be line item detail. You might on the fly, like for a big ticket item like supplies, you might want to on the fly come up here and insert another line item to break out your budget. Like travel might be trip 1, 2, or 3, or air, meals, hotel. That's great to break that out on the fly without having the administrator add some additional lines for you. But you might want some fixed structure on your accounts, like bouncing back to this revenue and COGS template, where this is what I'll call statistic number 1. Statistic number 2, you can give it any name. It does not have to be in your general ledger. And then I can come up here and formulate sales equaling whatever statistics, plus, minus, divided by, little if-then logic as well. Continuing downward, you see some icons indicator this little here, and really can do colors of the rainbow. I decided, yeah, blue color for a memo or note. And on the toolbar icons, I can come up here and say, show the annotations column. So if I'm reviewing one of my manager's budgets, I can see, all right, here's their note for the rent account, or here's a new TV and print advertising of why they budgeted this amount for advertising. A user, time, date, stamp. That also goes workflow history. So those accompanied with Forecaster's workflow history, we've added abilities for some of the filtering on that. I won't go through all the clicks on some of these. Additionally, workflow bullet point, like if I'm approving and rejecting budgets, we can do so through that. Continuing downward, we have also some of our big ticket items. I'm going to go through our detail screens, like biggest cost of most organizations is their payroll expense. These are grayed out lines that I purposely did for my end users. I can say, hey, gray shades stay away from, maybe rose and white, key in data for. Looking at the HR tab, if this user had access, because maybe another user having access to the same department, they might not see this HR detail. And that's really what we call a role or group. I'll use those words synonymously, role and group. All right, and then looking at the HR detail, and I have flashbacks of maybe the hundreds of customers I've worked with budgeting over the many years. You could do it by name, like Bob or Jane, or by position, like here's the registered nurse, here's the LPN, or even statistically based, maybe some variable staff based on number of units I'm going to budget for selling or producing, or the number of hours, etc. So even I can do a hybrid of all three of those methods, meaning by name or position or just statistically based. This screen right here is if I did it by name or position. Otherwise, back on the main tab, like we saw briefly on this other department, I could do it statistically based, like hours time average rate for position 1, like my senior consultants, or hours and rate for position 2, maybe my junior consultants. You can come up that very easily, and this is that cookie cutter approach. That little horror Excel picture I painted, like for that sales row, might be 1,200 plus formulas in an Excel hell world, but in your Microsoft Forecaster world, I'm going to go briefly to a line set definition. I'm logged in as now the administrator, and really I'm just circling back on some of the same recurring themes Noah introduced. Like first and foremost, a little review of what we saw before, where for all of my expenses, we're using a single summary account. That way, if I add any new expense accounts, I do not have to update either my report or more often your budget template as well. Otherwise, you're probably bouncing into FRx and Manager Porter doing all the edits. You're also bouncing the Forecaster doing double your efforts on multiple different line sets. But that's one of our favorite features from our customers. Additionally, here is what's maybe statistic 1 or 2 I can easily add in the system without needing to do so first in the general ledger. And then here's basically the formula. One formula instead of 1,200 Excel ones, taking statistic 1 times 2. We even can get very granular in our formulas where we can say, hey, this qualifier formula only apply for my sales division. And I can come up here and choose one of my summary levels to restrict that to. But note, this formula might apply to all that shares this one template. Again, I'll call this my revenue and COGS template, or default, versus maybe any additional unique line sets or rows they have. Now I'm really just going to take you now to the budget input definition, and it has a very identical look and feel to your report. But this is for budget entry, meaning here's maybe the default lines that every location department might use, or column. But additionally, let me bounce to this override area, because I could say, hey, for all companies, or I could restrict it to individual or group of companies via the roll-up tree, like I did on department. I said, hey, these group of departments, instead of that default line set, I want them to use a different line set. So again, leveraging your roll-ups for multiple global aspects within the tool here. Instead of bouncing about 3 or 4 different modules, all this is self-contained in one single application. I'm avoiding all the Excel interfaces and Excel hells out there. A few other little key things on what I'll call the administrator budget setup side would be on the options tab. Maybe I want this to be read-only, or I could enable audit trail history to see changes who and when to which accounts and departments. Do I want to allow some of my HR and capital and line item modeling, yay or nay, on this budget model? On the Human Resources tab, in Forecaster, you used to bounce around about 4 or 5 different areas, but we all put it nice tabular here. Like on the HR setup, this screen has a top and a bottom half. The top half here basically says, what expense account are we hitting? And I'm just zooming into my chart of accounts here in this natural account list. And we have, let's say, account 5,000 that we're hitting for salaries, but maybe another position might have a different account. I just simply add a different line, let's say, for my officers, if they hit a different GL account. But we call that the pay grade or salary grade as Forecaster's terminology, and then we migrate this over so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And other products we do work with, this is the most powerful, user-friendly, and value-driven one, so I love this HR setup. Otherwise, get a little more convoluted in some other applications. Down below, the second half are the benefit definitions you either want to globally define or micro define. Maybe some global assumptions might be good old taxes. And in general, benefits could either be a rate, which is a % of their salary, with a limit, like this top line for FICA does have, or without a limit, like our Medicare. Alternatively, instead of a % of salary, we could say it's being a fixed rate. Like health, Some organizations might say every person, $800 per head per month. But we have, like Forecaster had, even more robustly, the ability to add additional benefit fields. Like here's one for health. Instead of one flat rate for everybody, I just came up here, I gave it a name like health, and I just gave it a choice. Like I'll come up here and insert, and I might say something like none, because maybe my spouse has it, or HMO, PPMO, or United States Health, or Canadian Health. I could add quickly some choices, and then that way when we easily import our people, how about an organization we have 300 staff? Does not matter what payroll system you're on, common question we get. You simply need a column for what department they're in, what the location, how much they make, import it in. But I could have some optional fields like Derek has a family or Noah's single. And then that way the system might know to have X dollar, like 800 for any person that's a single, or maybe Y dollar, 1200 for some other grouping. And I can come up here on the benefit filter. We currently see 3 filters for my example, like health, 401k, workers' comp. But I can just come up here, add a 4th, 5th, 6th, et cetera, additional columns for, let's say, transportation allowance, yay or nay. Cell phone for sales, yes, maybe at certain dollars. So very easable, and I can just come up here and just hit the down arrow, add some more rows, copying and pasting as you see fit. But that's going to drive some of the salary, dollar, and related benefit on this one simple table you centrally and globally define for your users. Let me now also bounce back to this end user perspective. As I was just talking about the HR tab, and I need to remind myself, at a demonstration earlier, someone was asking me, hey, can I remove HR capital ability and read-write access, and I did so. So let me bounce back to the administrator view who does have capital access. All right, so this is for some new budgeted capital that you might have, like in the IT department. You might have some new servers, computer, furniture, fixtures, automobile. Based on your user security, I'll show you that in just a second here, and I'm wrapping up, I know, within the next 2 minutes, so sorry for maybe the time's sake. But on the capital tab, as I'll just bullet point, here might be new budgeted items. It will automatically flow to your balance sheet accounts, your expense for depreciation based on the life of months, and when you are budgeting that purchase date or depreciation. As I return back to the main tab, here's our new capital that eventually can flow through our balance sheet model where we bring in a column for beginning balances. And as we start to wrap up today's session, by all means, here's some of our contact information. We'll be glad to do a little one-on-one demonstration with your company. Many of your names and companies sound familiar as I saw the attendee list from years past, so welcome one and all. We can do this demonstration on maybe a trial site. Even you can log in and kick the tires and play around with, and most of our customers even we did using their data as maybe some takeaways here on this slide here. Otherwise, Noah, I'll pass it back to you for any other final remarks on your side, but thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Derek. I've been handling the questions as they came in the question and answer on that WebEx control panel. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Derek's got the contact information on the screen there for us. Email us at info@msxgroup.com with any questions you've got about Prospero as far as financial reporting questions, budgeting questions, pricing questions. That free trial site, we set those up for clients using demo data, or we can also set it up using your data, so it makes more sense looking at your dimensions, your account numbers, your set of companies when you're thinking about financial reporting and budgeting. On our website, we've got tons of documents with more details at msxgroup.com/Prospero. Or if you just want to jump on the phone, our number is 877-456-7632. So we are wrapping up for the day. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Jason, I'll let you come back in here and wrap up with us.
Okay, well, thank you, Noah. Thank you, Derek. And that will conclude today's event. There is a quick survey that pops up when you close out today. We appreciate any other feedback, and I will make sure that Noah and Derek get a written copy of all the questions that did come in today. Really appreciate all the feedback and input. with that, we're going to wrap up. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.